Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi. That's right, I decided it was time to take an on screen persona. And it's that time again. It's midweek, and I want you to play some magic so you can win 2 free rare or better ICRs. In this midweek magic, they're shaking up standard by banning some things and forcing us to think a little bit differently about the format. I think this is a clear indication of what they are thinking behind the scenes, that they aren't quite happy with standard yet, and they're trying to figure out what will have the most impact. So stay tuned. There's a lot to consider here before you start using your time and resources to continue building your collection. But before we get into all that, allow me to do the awkward thing and promote the channel. A while back, one of my viewers was kind enough to point out that we are the only channel putting out timely midweek magic content. So be sure to subscribe right here at the Planeswalker Stronghold for all of your future midweek magic needs, because we will be bringing you a deck list or strategy every single week. So what do you say we put all this aside and just get to that? And one last little public service announcement. Just be aware, this is a last call for the Dominaria United season giveaway that was launched back in mid-September. The Brothers War previews start in earnest on Thursday, and I will be selecting a winner at that time. And a lot of the folks that have commented don't have an email on file, so please make sure you have an email because I can't send you the prize otherwise. All right, so what do you say we get down to business and talk about what makes this event unique? That, of course, being the temporary ban list for standard, which only applies to this event. Let's start by saying they nuked black from orbit because apparently that was the only way to be sure. Not only is Meat Hook Massacre affected, but Liliana, Sheldred, and our boy, the tenacious underdog, apparently they found a way to keep him down. When you get beyond black, though, it's a much broader stroke and a lot less focused. In particular, red, the only card that got the temporary banning treatment was Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which I think says a lot about what's going on with mono red, not just right now in standard, but as an archetype in general. There's generally not one really broken card that makes the decks all work, much like Meat Hook Massacre or Sheldred over in black. What you end up with is a much more generalized archetype, and your cars, your rare and mythics kind of play second fiddle in most cases, and usually aren't problematic and allow you to do a lot very often with commons and uncommons. From there, we've got Blue, Hullbreaker Horror, and Ledger Shredder. I'm not really seeing these as huge problems in the format. I'm not sure why they're included in this particular thing. Memory Deluge, on the other hand, for blue is a significant piece of card draw and definitely what makes those controlled decks work. And in fact, really, this looks to be kind of an attack at the X-blue control decks, most often blue-white control. I'm not really sure how much of an impact this is going to have on the format, even if they were to bring all three of these bans to bear, but I suppose it could. In white, we've got Wandering Emperor, which has become kind of a ubiquitous card. If you're making white mana symbols and not running Wandering Emperor in some quantity, I really don't understand why, particularly when everyone has at least one copy of Emperor from their new player experience. So I do think this is a good experiment to kind of shake up white a little bit. The companion card is, of course, a wedding announcement, which does so much for card draw and pumps your board state, floods the board with tokens. I mean, it's really just a very solid card, and in more white decks than not. So I do think taking that out and seeing what happens is a good idea. The only green card to talk about is a Titan of Industry, and I mean it's just the big dumb green creature of choice right now. I do think it's interesting to see what else comes into play if you remove that from decks, because that really is the top end finisher of choice. And before we move on to the meta in general, let's take a moment to recognize the fact that they specifically banned Meat Hook Massacre for the shakeup, despite the fact that it is, in fact, banned in Standard already. Read a memo, guys. Not knowing what's going on in your own game is not a good look. When we take a look at the best of one standard meta on Alchemy, the first thing and most obvious is Mono Black is still king of the hill, running over 18% of the meta with a 60% win rate. Absolute king of the hill, but let's not overlook the fact that that is a drop of nearly 50% pre-Meat Hook. Before they banned Meat Hook, Mono Black was running between 35 and 40% of the meta with a win rate of 61 plus, and in some cases as high as 65 or 69%, depending upon which weeks and time periods you were looking at. So the banning of Meat Hook obviously helped, but it did not unthrone this from having an absolute domination of the meta. From there, we've got a mono blue. I hesitate to call this tempo because the build isn't quite tempo, and even though it's running a 12% mix on the meta because it matches up very nicely against mono black, it does have a 60% win rate, again, mostly because of the matchup with mono black. For the rest of the meta, I really feel like mono blue is kind of missing something. From there, we've got the usual suspects, the mono red deck. Selesnya Enchantments is a fantastic budget mix, pulling right now over 7% of the meta and a 59% win rate. We did a deck tech on that a couple weeks back for Midweek Magic. If you haven't seen it, when you have the chance to have drafted Kamigawa, it is a fantastic investment. Rakdos, of course, is kind of feeling the blunt of that Meat Hook ban as well, although not nearly as much as the mono black version. It's still 4+% with a 59% win rate, as is Gruul. And of course, bringing up the rear here, something I haven't been able to say in a while, mono white aggro under 3% of the meta, but still sporting a 60% win rate. That's up nearly 1% on the meta mix, and I think that's going to continue to climb as people stop experimenting with non-Meat Hook builds for mono black and maybe move into some other things. I think probably mono white is going to double and be in that 4 to 6% meta range next time we look at it. And I think this standard shakeup is going to be a catalyst to start that movement. Mono red is often the first solace that people take. It's the deck people turn to anytime there's a meta shift, whether that is a new set coming out or bannings or adjustments and things like that. The reason being is because it's so effective in those situations, it's very rarely affected by the ban itself. I think the last time a red card got banned was Fires of Invention, and that's been years. So really, it's a great place for budget players because you have all those commons and uncommons. The current meta red, of course, is more what I call a red rush. It's really built on those fast, hasty creatures and a low curve and just enough removal to finish off your opponent. But at 15 rare cards and 6 mythics, it's not exactly what I call a budget-friendly build. Of course, if you happen to have those cards or you're willing to invest the wild cards, there's no real downside to doing so. But what if I told you you could build a deck that will sport pretty much the same win rate with no wild cards? Is that something you'd be interested in? Because I think mono red artifacts might just be the deck for you this week. All right, so let's take a look at this mono red artifact list. This is essentially a no rare, 0 wild card deck. It does lean a little heavily into Kamigawa, so if you haven't had the opportunity to draft that just yet, be patient. Your time will come, and this deck will essentially build itself and be there waiting for you at that time. The one rare that's in here is Eater of Virtue. As a 1-drop artifact, it fits very nicely with the theme. It also pumps your creatures up and makes your evasive creatures even better, which, you know, is really what a red aggro deck is trying to do at the end of the day. And I can still call this a 0 wildcard deck because you may recognize this from your new player experience. Although it's not a card that gets a lot of play, but it's quite good. From there, we've got the usual suspects of red. We've got 4 copies of Kamano, most of which are from your new player experience. I think we got 3 there. We are adding in Phoenix Chick. I'm running 2 copies. Honestly, I would probably run 4 if I had the 4 to run, but I've been a little unlucky with that card so far in my Dominaria pack openings. And, well, I just hate to spend wild cards on a card that I know I'm going to open later, if not sooner. Play with Fire is in there, mostly because it not only goes to face, but gives you a nice scry option, and card selection in red is a rare treat. Rabbit batteries all up in there. The nice thing with this is to be able to move it around and keep all of your creatures having haste. There are a few in here that don't. Reinforced Ronin. This is basically our bounce effect, and he's an artifact, so there's some synergies here that you will see very, very shortly. Simian Sling, this is one of those cards I would probably cut. It does have some nice thing against like the token decks, because it just kills off whatever blocker they're running. But I would much rather run a Phoenix Chick here. It's in here for budgetary concerns. Valdarian Epicure is another one of those cards. I would probably cut a copy of this to go with Phoenix Chick, and maybe cut a copy for a 3rd copy of High Speed Hoverbike, just depending upon what the meta is doing at the moment. But the fact that this hits for the 1 as soon as it ETBs, that blood token can be very nice for card draw, card selection, if you need that. And again, it's so rare in red. And this is a pretty good thing to drop on turn 2 after a Kamano. Making this a 2/2 is pretty sweet. Voltage Surge just loves the artifacts, and this is your heavy hitting removal. It cannot go face, but the fact that it can deal 4 and take problems out while potentially adding other value is very, very nice. Iron Apprentice is Voltage Surge's best friend. There's many times where I hit turn 3 and my opponent has dropped like an X4 creature that is just going to stall the board out, and I drop the Iron Apprentice and immediately sack it to Voltage Surge and move his +1/+1 counter to another creature that didn't come into play this turn. So yeah, there's just all sorts of value and synergy there. High Speed Hoverbike, I'm running 2 copies here. Not only is it flash, but it's also flying with a crew of 1. So you can use something like your Epicure to crew your Hoverbike, attach Rabbit Battery to it, swing for 3 evasive. Also, Eater of Virtue goes very nicely on this. Of course, just keep in mind when it reverts to its vehicle form, it's going to drop those equipments. But that also means you have untapped equipments or untapped creatures now, potentially in the form of Rabbit Battery, to pull double duty as a blocker. That can be really quite nice. I do also like using Reinforced Ronin to activate or crew the hover bike and then put the tapped battery on the hover bike for that same swing for 3 effect while not really giving up much in the board state. Of course, the center of this deck is Patchwork Automation as a 2-drop. Ward 2 1/1 gets an additional +1/+1 counter every time you cast an artifact spell, not to be confused with when an artifact comes into play. So your Epicure will not trigger this, but still fantastic. Dropping this on 2 after Kimono and having a 2/2 with Ward, that then you can follow up and make probably a 4/4 on turn 3 and be able to swing it. Really, really solid. I've seen people scoop when I turn 3, put a second Patchwork Automation down, really more times than I can count. The last card in here is Circuit Mender for 3 mana, 2/3. When it ETBs, you gain 2 life, which is kind of nice in those mono red mirror matches. And when it leaves play, you draw a card. And don't forget, not only can you use this as a sacrificial blocker, but you can run the Voltage Surge out there, deal 4, take out a threat/blocker, and draw a card. So again, just high degrees of synergy here, which is what makes this deck oh so successful.
What's that? You didn't catch all that? Well, Matt would like you to know that any deck list applicable to this video can be found down in the doobly-doo. Hey, let's not forget, the whole reason to participate in these totally free midweek Magic events is the prize support is awesome.
And don't forget, if this video gets just 10 likes by 8 p.m. tonight on the day of release, I will be live playing this on my Twitch channel. And with all that having been said, don't forget, smash that like button like Ronnie J would. And until next time, I'll see you in the arena.